Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Guerrilla Poker, and in this video I'm gonna be covering a really cool hand that was played on the new season of High Stakes Poker, which you can see on PokerGo. I think it's a really cool hand and it illustrates a dilemma that you often have on the tables when you know poker theory. Very often knowing poker theory can be a double-edged sword, and it's a funny thing to say, but I think this hand kind of shows that. I think it's a really cool hand. So to start the hand, I'll give you guys some background on at least one of the players, who's Rick Solomon. Rick Solomon has been playing really loose the entire season so far. Pre-flop, calling 3-bets, 3-betting, opening. Everything is super loose. I'm sure at this point everyone knows this at the table if they didn't coming in. So his ranges are always going to be all over the place in terms of hand selection. So in this hand there is an $800 straddle from LaForbes. Rick Solomon raises to 6,000 with a 5 of diamonds, 4 of spades. Way too loose. Andres 3-bets him with ace-jack offsuit. Probably knows he's going too loose. Personally, I'd look to 3-bet bigger than this. Rick Solomon's playing lots of hands, seeing lots of flops. He's not going to be sensitive if you make it 15k or 20k. Of course, if you make it 40k, it's a different story. But this 3-bet size, in my eyes, it's just a waste with ace-jack. You're pushing more equity. The only reason you could do this is if you were saying, I want to make sure to hit the flop because Rick Solomon's so aggressive, I don't want to bloat the pot too much with ace-high, and then, I'm just helpless if I miss. But that's definitely not the case. Rick Solomon, even though he's been very loose pre-flop, post-flop, he hasn't done anything too crazy. He's actually played, the right moves at the right time, but he hasn't gone crazy. He's not like crazy triple barreling, check raising, stacking off anything. He knows more or less where he's at. Definitely very experienced. So, of course, Rick Solomon is going to call the 3-bet with 5-4. We get King 7-8 two-tone board. With Rick Solomon out of position, he flops a gut shot and Andres flops ace-high. Andres makes a small c-bet, which is kind of the standard solver play for a lot of guys these days. You have the betting lead, you bet small, kind of shake the tree, see what falls out, make Rick Solomon fold with a bunch of his misses. Definitely reasonable. I would like to say that versus someone with ranges that are this different than what you're used to, I'm not sure that's actually the best strategy. But be that as it may, small c-bet, Rick Solomon calls with his gut shot, which of course we wouldn't expect otherwise. Maybe throw in some raises sometimes. Turn 8 of diamonds goes check, check. And river 8 of hearts. So everything misses. And Rick Solomon is gonna bluff at the pot with a $24,000 bet. And now Andres has a decision to make with ace-jack. Now, why do I say he has a decision to make? Well, when you look at the board, King 7-8, 8-8, and Rick Solomon called a small flop bet, he could presumably have 4-5, 6-4, 6-5, 6-9, 10-6. I won't keep going and name all the possible straight draws, and you could have a bunch of flush draws. So there is a ton of stuff that Rick Solomon could be bluffing with on the river. In terms of value hands, if we assume, had he had quads, he'd bet bigger. We're talking mainly having a king in your hand. And his bet definitely makes sense for a king. But if you go with a bit of combinatorics, and we can do this with no solver, right? Just plain Equilab, which is a free simple program that everyone should probably have as an analysis tool. You can put in the board and put in Andres' hand and put in a range for Rick Solomon, and seeing 4 or 5, let's use this to extrapolate that he's going to have these hands. Of course, not everything, right? But connected stuff, suited stuff, right? Presumably these hands are in his range. I'm not putting 10-6 off and 9-5 off, just the suited version. I will of course put a bunch of flush draws. Not every single flush draw, but definitely quite a few are going to be in there. So these will put in only spades. We have the value range, and here, of course, we want to put in all the suited kings, and we can go down to king 10 offsuit. I think is reasonable in terms of how Rick's been playing. Maybe king 9 if we're being optimistic. And let's throw in a few combos of quads, although I think it's very unlikely quads gets to the river here and then bets this small of an amount. And what you guys can see is when we put in this kind of range, ace of clubs, jack of spades is actually a favorite against the betting range. And keep in mind you're getting pot odds, so you can be good 25% of the time you're still making money with a call. But if we look at this wide of a range, ace-jack's actually a heavy favorite. So what's going through Andreas's head when he gets to the river? When you're a very technical poker player, when you've studied with solvers and software, etc., you look at situations and you look at your hand and you can kind of intuitively in your head know what you're supposed to do from a technical standpoint. And in this sense, blockers are very important, and there's also the assumption that your opponent has a balanced range. Now, if Rick Solomon is bluffing a balanced range, that's very, very different than what I put in an Equilab. And generally a balanced range will have the correct ratio of bluffs and value hands to give you a tough decision with your bluff catchers. And then a very strong differentiating factor is often something like blockers. And here Andres has the jack of spades, which should make him feel really terrible. First of all, it removes a bunch of flush draws from Solomon's range. And second, it removes jack 10 and jack 9, two prime bluffing combinations. And indeed, if rather than something like ace jack of spades, he'd had ace deuce of clubs, and you guys see here it's 63% equity, even against my crazy range, the equity jumps by 3%. So even though the range is very wide, there can be a big equity shift due to switching the kicker around and how it interacts with villain's bluffing range. So if I'm in Andreas's shoes, and this is what I'm imagining is going through his head. He's like, I have such a bad hand to call with. You know, I'm going to get to this situation with a bunch of better hands. I'm going to have hands like ace queen, which is infinitely better. The jack might not be a spade. You know, maybe I have something like ace deuce or fours or like a lot of other hands that have similar effective showdown value, but in terms of removal are doing a lot better. And calling his hand is something that's very difficult to do when you know how bad of a call it is and what the theory looks like. Counterpoint to that is that this is not a theory spot. To begin with, the 3-bet size was theoretically off. Clearly Rick Solomon's not playing a normal range. He opened to 7.5 times the straddle just to begin the hand. Like, everything about this hand takes you very far away from theory. And in my eyes, this is one of the spots where if you're a player who studies theory a lot, you're like, oh, well, you know, I had this nice situation 3-betting ace-jack offsuit against a very loose player, but it didn't work out. You know, run out is one where I have to fold and just let the hand go. But if you're a lot sharper and deeper into theory, and this is a thought process I would like you guys to have and possibly to learn from me. And this is like why I say the difference between a blue line player and a red line player. Like, a blue line player will just side fold. For me, for someone who's more focused on the red line, and this is something I talk about in my course, which is on the website, and I highly recommend you guys check out. When you think about this situation, you're like, okay, there's theory, and theory says that calling with ace-jack with a jack of spades is probably losing me something like 3 to 4 big blinds because of the jack of spades having a bad effect. 3 to 4 big blind in this context, maybe you're losing something like $4,000 by calling with a jack of spades, in theory. And then you go, but, you know, in practice, theory assumes villain has a balanced range. I don't think that's true. This is a run out where to have a balanced range, you need to either be a lot tighter pre-flop than this guy, or you need to actually be giving up a lot with busted draws, and I don't think that that's happening near enough, and then this becomes a snap call and you're really, really happy about it. and you just call way too much. This is how the exploit counter-exploit game works, where if you think your opponent is making a mistake, you have to make a mistake to take advantage of that. You can't stay within theory and gain a maximum value. If you're exploiting mistakes, you can get more if you're correct, and you lose more if you're incorrect. If you're just staying within theory, of course, if you do this really, really accurately, like some guys, top of the world guys, can do, you just beat everyone. But you're definitely not making the maximum win rate in every situation. And it's also really hard to do. And I much prefer in this spot, I think this is a really obvious spot to call ace-jack. I was actually pretty surprised to see this fold. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our new website, and I'll see you next time.